Good morning, folks. This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, VanguardNE.ca. I'm Norman James, along with my sidekick, Mike Augello. We're talking about the Toronto Maple Leafs. 2 games to go in the regular season. One against Tampa, one against Montreal. Then it's on to Boston to face those lowly Bruins in round 1 of the 2019 Stanley Cup playoffs. Michael, happy AM, my friend.
Good morning, Norman. Yeah, it's cold and there's a little bit of frost on the ground, so it's not exactly April the 4th, but I'll take it.
We're making a Maple Leafs playoff checklist. What do the Leafs need to pack for Boston? Let us know inside the YouTube comment section while you're listening to this podcast. So, Mike, we'll get to the Leafs checklist. They have a lot of stuff they're going to need to put into the trailer as they haul down to Massachusetts. Tampa, the Lightning lost to Montreal the other night. For as great a season as they've had, there's really nothing left to prove. If the Leafs beat the Lightning tonight, is there any solace in that?
I think that similarly, the attitude from the Maple Leafs is, sort of put yourself in bubble wrap and make sure you don't get hurt and, stay with your sort of regular routine if you want to. But if the veterans want a day off, Mike Babcock indicated on Tuesday that he went to his veteran players and said, if you want a day off before the playoffs, be my guest.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, Freddie Anderson's going to start the last 2 games because there's a big break between Saturday's finale and Thursday, which will be the opening game of the first round. But I wouldn't be surprised if, you see Morgan Riley or Ron Hainsey or some of the forwards take a night off. Now, Patrick Marleau said he wants to keep his streak going, so he's going to play the remaining 2 games. But I think that's going to be, I think there's no impetus to beat Tampa. I mean, if they can score goals, sure, that's fine. And I think if with players with personal goals like Tavares getting to 50 goals, which he's 3 short, or Matthews getting to 40, which he's 3 short, I believe, or Kasperi Kapanen getting to 20, which he's 1 short, that's going to be the goal. But in terms of winning and losing, I don't think that's the goal at all the last 2 games.
This is the Leafs Convo podcast for Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, VanguardNE.ca. I'm surprised by the amount of concession shown by Leafs fans over the last little while when bringing up the problems with the games we have seen, the feedback being the playoffs are coming, baby. That's what we're really playing for. Everything else is just a waste of time. Everything else is a lead up. I think this regular season has been a disappointment, Mike. If this team does not win in the next 2 games, it will not reach 100 points. Perhaps it's the conciliatory attitude that has a lot of people thinking, can't cry over spilt milk, wipe it up, move on, and let's just see what happens with Boston.
You had them in the teens, I think like 110 or 111. I had 109 or something like that when we did the show at the beginning of the season. And I think that most people had more loftier goals. They think they expected the Tampa Bay to be like the 77 Canadians and almost have 60. I think they would have, if they would have won out, they would have had 63. I think they're at 60 right now. And, and Tampa Bay, it's not going to be as tough of a contest without Victor Hedman in the lineup, but they're going to play Vasilevsky and they have a ton of talent. So it'll be a tough contest, but I just don't think the motivation to win is not there. The motivation to get ready for Boston is there. So if that goes part and parcel with winning, then I'm sure the Leafs won't turn down a victory and would like to win on home ice in the regular season finale. But don't be mistaken. The focus is TD Garden,
sure,
Game 1 next Thursday, and everything else is secondary. And that's why I think the main factor here tonight is, make sure you don't get hurt. Like Austin Matthews took that shot off his foot in Ottawa on Saturday, in New York on Monday, and everybody was thinking worst case scenario, and thankfully he dodged the bullet. But that is the concern. Just stay healthy.
Is this just us? Are we the only ones thinking this way, Mike? Or is any fan base with a team that is about to enter the dance feeling excitement but also trepidation?
I think to a greater or lesser extent, everything is elevated. Everything is magnified when it's Toronto. And it should be, because Toronto is the center of the hockey universe. So why not the expectations? Why not the trepidation, as you say? So I think it makes sense. There was a lot of anticipation with this team
Mm-hmm.
going into the season, and I think in general, it's been slight disappointment, especially in the last 20 to 25 games after the deadline with the injuries on the blue line and the inconsistency defensively. That can all be erased if they play
Sure.
well in the playoffs. But as we're going to talk about the next week leading up to the playoffs,
Mm-hmm.
it's tough to flip the switch.
Yeah.
And that's why I think, you and I and a lot of other people are looking at this team going into the playoffs with some skepticism about how well they can play.
Look, it's not like this team can be remodeled as of now.
Right.
This team is what it is. What are the excuses going to be if the team loses tonight? Well, it was just this game 81, everybody's tired. And then they lose to Montreal. Well, it's game 82, big deal. Then they lose in the opener of the playoffs. Well, there's 3 more games to go. There's nothing wrong with facing reality head on and understanding that this team has problems and keeping your fingers crossed. I'd rather see people do that as opposed to, wait till they turn it on.
Well, I mean, I got the impression that on Tuesday when, before the game and after the optional morning skate and talking to some of the players when they had held media scrums, that they were paying lip service to, we have a chance at home ice advantage still. It's mathematical. But, come on. Boston has, all Boston needed to do was get one point, and the Leafs, all they had to do was lose 1 point, and it was over with. But, while the opportunity is still there, you have to say, okay, we're still going for that. But now, the way they played, and I opened my column on Hockey Buzz yesterday with this. I said, they clinched a playoff spot in New York on Monday, and they played like they clinched a playoff spot on Monday on Tuesday, because they didn't show up until the middle of the second period on Tuesday against Carolina. So, I mean, it is what it is. I think they're concerned about, getting Jake Gardiner into a game and seeing how he plays. Babcock indicated that he's going to probably, if Gardiner gets back in the lineup, play 7 defensemen so he can, make sure that he doesn't overwork him. Just get him in there, see how he is. That may be what they do in the playoffs. It may not be, but I'm sure Babcock will keep what he does tactically going into the postseason close to the vest. But that's the overall concern. I mean, I get your point in terms of, like, everybody seems accepting of this, but they were locked into third place. They were locked into where they were going to be. After the deadline, they were locked into what the roster was.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's acceptance there until the result. If they lose in the first round to Boston, then I think you're gonna see the sort of seething vitriol of the Leaf fan base about the disappointment of what they didn't do this year.
And let me guess whose fault it will be. Mike Babcock. It'll be all his fault.
He'll take the brunt of it, but I think there's going to be enough blame to go around between management, players, and coach. It's going to be this is you can say, well, Babcock can't get past the first round. Well, you can also say that they didn't get the players that they needed to advance, and you can also say that the players that were there, one of them, there's one in particular who signed a big contract, didn't show up. But we won't talk about him.
No, we will. Yeah. We will talk about him. And Mike Babcock needs to revamp his game. Austin Matthews, love that cat, but if Austin Matthews continues to push his game further away from the net, he's not going to be as an effective player as everybody believes he will be, and it would be sad for his career because he is one of my favorite athletes, period. I love the guy. Kyle Dubas. Hate to say a toe-to-so, but a toe-to-so, I effing a toe-to-so on Garrett Sparks. The hockey decision, out the window. The business decision to bring him on seemed great at the time. It's paid no dividends at this point. And Kyle Dubas not dealing William Nylander is, for this season, has been disastrous. If you deal William Nylander, I know it's potentially not at a position of strength, but you bring in more help to bolster the back end this year. You could have done that. I don't know, with Brett Pesce or whomever. Might not have been the package that you wanted in return, but to help this year, you could have done it.
First, I have little concerns about Austin Matthews. I mean, I think he's.
I just threw him in there. I mean, I'm talking more about Nylander. I'm talking more about Nylander and Garrett Sparks.
Specifically to Sparks. I mean, the loss on Tuesday marks 8 losses in his last 10 games. I looked up the statistics. Under 900 save percentage, 3.34 goals
Tough.
against, I believe.
Those are the numbers that you really. Those are the numbers that you really want to hone in on, Mike, and that's the problem.
And right, and the thing is, and it's like, I mean, okay, not to direct all the criticism and all the focus on him, but as a comparative, you look at what McElhinney did last year, not just statistically, can't say statistically today, but just purely wins. He had 11 wins last year in, I think, 18 games, and Sparks is 8-1. The difference between McElhinney and Sparks is the difference between the Leafs and the Bruins right now in the standings, which means if they had McElhinney, and this is probably too simple, if they had McElhinney, they'd be tied for home ice advantage right now instead of being 6 points behind. That, I understood the decision. I didn't agree with it, but I understood the decision made by Kyle Dubas at the beginning of the year to keep a 25-year-old goaltender who would won a Calder Cup and every prize in the AHL rather than a 35-year-old backup who was going to be a UFA at the end of the year.
Business decision.
At the end
at the time?
Right. It was a business. Right. It was. And at the end of the year, you have to look at it objectively and say it was a dramatic failure. Now, they've signed Sparks to another year, but that doesn't mean they don't go out in free agency or trade for a backup goaltender and send Sparks to the Marlies next year. But because if you look at the goaltending situation in the organization right now, Frederik Andersen has got 2 years left in his contract. They just signed both Joseph Woll, their third-round pick from 2016, and Ian Scott, who I think was a fourth-round pick in 2017. Both are very good goaltending prospects. They're going to need time in the minor leagues, at least 2 years, to get up to speed and be good pros, as Mike Babcock would say. And at that point, then we see if they're ready to be backups or if they're ready to be maybe step in and be starters in the NHL. But it's going to take time, and you may need a veteran like Sparks to go down with the Marlies, or if they send him on waivers, he may get claimed by somebody else. After this result, you cannot give Garrett Sparks, the number 2 job and say it's yours. You have to bring in a veteran to challenge him because Mike Babcock, I do not think, will play Garrett Sparks. He'll give him the Frankie Corrado treatment.
Are Julian Brisebois and John Cooper on the same page, Mike?
I think in general, yeah. I mean, there's always little disagreements between coaches and general managers, and I think that some of the disagreements between Babcock and Dubas are little, but and of course they're elevated and magnified because it's Toronto. Yeah. But I think that those differences and the failure to improve the defense and maybe the failure in the sense of the goaltending to keep McElhinney over Sparks has cost this team this year.
Leafs fans, we're putting together a Leafs playoff checklist. What do they need to pack for Boston? April 11th is just around the corner. Game 1 of that first-round Stanley Cup series with the rival Bruins is coming at us quick. What do the Leafs have to put in the U-Haul and truck down to Boston to be as ready as they possibly can to overcome Mount Bruin? I hope Kyle Dubas decides to go on Kijiji and look for a new oracle going forward. Whoever he's getting his advice from needs to be fired. And I think Kyle Dubas is smart enough to realize he has a chance to be a wonderful, productive, and winning general manager with the biggest team in hockey. As this team goes forward and fails, that's going to start to eat him up. Just a couple more points, Mike, and then I'll let you wrap up. Garrett Sparks, I love the kid. I don't want to put any blame for this team's shortcoming of 7-8 wins, fewer than I thought on a backup goaltender, but he should not be the backup, but he was made the backup. Ron Hainsey should not be playing 25 minutes a night, but he's playing 25 minutes a night. Whether they beat Boston or bow out, this is where the Leafs need to take assessment. There are components to this team that still need to be improved to take that next step. And, we all got ahead of ourselves when Tavares came on board and the team got off to a really crazy start with lots of goals and stuff like that. And a lot of that's on us. So I think we're all settling into reality here. I just want to know from fans where this idea comes from that the Leafs, who have been disappointing, will all of a sudden turn into the 76 Canadiens. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, who have put together one of the best regular seasons we've seen in recent memory, one of the best all time, are all of a sudden, once they get into the playoffs, going to turn into a peewee team. None of that makes sense. We have to deal with reality here. Once we accept reality and understand reality, we can achieve the reality we all want.
Yeah, I think right now, the most interesting thing that we'll see over the next week leading into game one is and then into the series is what Mike Babcock will do in the matchup against the Bruins. A lot of people thought he was outcoached by Bruce Cassidy last year. In fact, I think, it was a miracle that they got to 7 games with Kadri out for 3 games with, some of the problems that they had. I mean, Anderson was subpar at best, great on one night, bad on the other night in the series. They're a better team overall than they were last year, even though it doesn't reflect in the points. But it's going to be that matchup. It's going to be, what do they do now with the 1-2 punch of Tavares and Matthews going up against Bergeron and Krejci? Can they create matchup advantages that will facilitate a victory? That'll be the most interesting story during the series, and what they should do and what they didn't do. I think we have to sort of move away from that and look at the series and look at everything objectively, and then after the result, then analyze what happened.
Mike, all I want to do is feel good about the hockey team that I care about so much. And I think a lot of people want to feel the same way. I'm not being negative when all I see is negative. I don't see a lot of positive right now. If this team were on a run, do you honestly think I would be throwing cold water on it? Not a chance. What we've seen of late does not stir up a lot of positivity and a lot of incredible imagination as to where this team may end up this season. And that is the problem. It could change tonight if the Leafs go nuts on Tampa, and whether Tampa gives a shit. All I want to see is something good, Mike. There's 2 games between now and the start of the playoffs. Give us something to believe in with our own 2 eyes. We know what this team's capable of, but I just haven't seen it of late. Mike, we got to go.
Thanks, Norman.
We would like to thank Vanguard Northeast Realty in Scarborough, title sponsor of the Leafs Convo, demonstrating passion for the industry and a superior level of excellence in selling, leasing, and marketing your property. Vanguard Northeast Realty.